The assayer's office smelled of dust and old metal. Roberta stood at the scarred counter. Her black mourning dress faded to charcoal after 2 years. Autumn light filtered through windows that hadn't seen cleaning in months, casting pale squares across the plank floor. Her hands trembled as she worked the wedding band from her finger. The gold had worn thin where it pressed against her palm during 2 decades of marriage. It caught the light as she placed it on the counter, and for a moment she couldn't release it. "I need to sell this," she said quietly. The assayer, a grizzled man named Thornton, picked up the ring with practiced gentleness. He examined it through his loupe, turned it, weighed it in his palm. His face showed sympathy, but his voice stayed businesslike. "It's good gold, ma'am. I can give you $8. $8. Her son's fever had burned for 3 days now. Dr. Morrison wanted 12 for the medicine, another 3 for his house call. She'd already sold everything else: her husband's pocket watch, her mother's cameo, the decent furniture from their old house. "That's fair value," Thornton added. "I'm sorry it ain't more." She nodded, unable to speak. Her throat felt too tight for words. From the corner of the room, a man cleared his throat. Roberta had noticed him when she entered, tall, maybe 40, with the weathered face of someone who worked under sun and wind. He'd been waiting his turn, hat in hands, but now he stepped forward. "Pardon me, ma'am," he said. "I couldn't help overhearing." She stiffened, pride flaring even through desperation. She didn't need pity. Didn't need curious strangers witnessing her lowest moment. "I collect frontier jewelry," the man continued. His voice was gentle, respectful. "Preserve the stories in the gold. If you're willing to sell, I'd be honored to purchase that ring. I'd pay fair say $25. $25. More than triple its value." Roberta looked at him sharply, searching for mockery or condescension. She found neither. His eyes were kind but not pitying. He looked tired himself. She realized, like someone who understood the weight of hard choices. "Why?" she asked. "Because some stories deserve preserving," he said simply. "And because I can afford to pay what it's worth to you. Not just what the gold weighs." Thornton glanced between them, then quietly pushed the ring toward the stranger. The man counted out $25 in bills and coins, placing them on the counter beside the band. Then he picked up the ring carefully, studied it for a moment. Roberta took the money with shaking hands. It was enough. Medicine, food, another month's rent. Her son would live. That was all that mattered. "Thank you," she whispered. She turned toward the door, clutching the bills against her chest. She needed to get to Dr. Morrison before he left for afternoon calls. Needed to get home to Tommy, to see his fever break, to "Ma'am." The stranger called. "I believe you forgot something." She turned. He stood with his hand extended. In his palm lay her wedding band. Along with 2 wrapped packages, she recognized medicine from the doctor's cabinet. Supplies from the general store. "I don't understand," she said. "I also have a problem. Ma'am, my ranch accounts are in chaos. My father kept them well, but I inherited his land sense, not his ledger skills. If you have a head for numbers, I need help. Fair wages for honest work." As the assayer reached for the ring, Austin stepped forward with quiet intervention. "I'd like to make an offer on that ring, if the lady's willing." Roberta stared at the packages in his hand, the medicine, the supplies, her wedding band glinting between them. "You already bought these." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "I did. Seemed you needed them urgent." He met her eyes steadily. "This ain't charity, ma'am. I'm asking for help I genuinely need. You don't know if I can even add straight. You managed a freight business after your husband passed. Kept it running 8 months before selling it to pay debts you hadn't known existed." He said it matter-of-factly, without intrusion. "Thornton here mentioned it when I asked about hiring help. Said you had the best head for numbers he'd seen." Thornton nodded confirmation, looking slightly embarrassed. Roberta's mind raced. The medicine in his hand could break Tommy's fever tonight. The ring on his palm was her last connection to James, to the life they'd built before the wagon accident took him. And this stranger was offering both back, but asking something in return. Pride warred with necessity. She'd been raised to stand on her own feet, to never take what wasn't earned. But she'd also been raised to recognize when stubbornness became foolishness. "What's your name?" she asked. "Austin Hayes. I run the Hayes Ranch, about 5 miles west of town." The Hayes place. She knew it by reputation. 3 generations of cattlemen. Good land. Solid herd. "Your father died last year. 18 months back, thrown from a horse." Austin's jaw tightened briefly. He kept everything in his head supplier agreements, pricing, breeding schedules. "I found ledgers, but they're scattered and incomplete. I've been treading water since, barely keeping current with what's owed and owing." He held out the packages again. This time she saw his hands properly. They were working hands, scarred and calloused. But they held her possessions with care. "Come look at the books," Austin said. "If you think you can help, we'll negotiate fair wages. If you can't, you keep the medicine and the ring regardless. No obligation." "Yeah, why would you do that?" "Because a child shouldn't suffer for lack of $12. And because I watched you stand here willing to sell your last precious thing to save him. That kind of character is rare." Roberta felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction, she wasn't ready for that. Might never be ready, but recognition. This man understood what it meant to carry impossible weight alone. She reached out and took the medicine first, then the supplies. Finally, carefully, her wedding band. It slid back onto her finger where it belonged. "I'll come look at your books, Mr. Hayes," she said. "But I won't take charity. If I work your accounts, you'll pay what the work's worth. Not a penny more for sympathy." A smile touched his tired face. "Yes, ma'am. I wouldn't have it any other way. I need 2 days to see my son well again. Then I'll ride out." 2 days. Austin agreed. He settled his hat back on his head and nodded to Thornton. "Much obliged for the space." As he left, Roberta stood clutching her returned treasures. Through the window, she watched him mount a patient gray horse and turn west toward open country. He rode like a man carrying heavy burdens, shoulders square but head slightly bowed. Thornton cleared his throat. "Hayes is good people. Mrs. Brennan. Honest as they come. Ranch is struggling, though, that's no secret. If you can help him save it, you'd be doing the whole county a service. That land's been Hayes land since before the war." She nodded slowly. "I'll see what I can do." Outside, the October wind had picked up, carrying the first real cold of autumn. But Roberta barely felt it as she hurried toward Dr. Morrison's house. Tommy would have his medicine. She still had her ring. And maybe, just maybe, she'd found a way to be more than merely surviving. 2 days later, Roberta rode borrowed mare toward the Hayes Ranch. Tommy's fever had broken the second night, and this morning he'd eaten breakfast with appetite. Mrs. Chen next door had agreed to mind him for the afternoon. The ranch appeared gradually as she crested a low rise. The main house stood 2 stories, solid timber construction with a stone foundation. Outbuildings clustered nearby: barn, stable, smokehouse, bunkhouse. Fences ran straight and true across rolling pasture where cattle grazed in small groups. It looked prosperous from distance, but as she rode closer, she noticed details. Shingles missing from the barn roof, a corral fence with broken rails, the bunkhouse windows dark, suggesting no hired hands. The herd smaller than land this size should support. Good bones, she thought, but struggling. Austin emerged from the barn as she dismounted. He'd cleaned up since town, fresh shirt. Hair combed, but the exhaustion around his eyes remained. "Mrs. Brennan, thank you for coming. You can call me Roberta, if we're to work together." "Austin." "Then—" He took her horse's reins. "I'll get her settled. Then we can look at the accounts." The house interior matched its exterior, well built but showing strain. Furniture was quality but worn. The kitchen was clean but bare of the small luxuries that made a house a home. No curtains, no decorative touches. A man's space. Functional but lonely. Austin spread ledgers across the kitchen table. 3 years' worth. Maybe more. Some showed his father's neat handwriting. Others Austin's rougher hand. Papers stuck out at odd angles. Receipts were tucked loose between pages. Roberta sat down and opened the most recent ledger. She read in silence, turning pages, occasionally pulling out a loose receipt to examine. Austin stood by the window, giving her space but watching her face. Her expression shifted as she read, neutral at first, then concerned, then quietly alarmed. After 30 minutes, she closed the ledger and looked up. When did you last balance your accounts? My father did it quarterly. I haven't managed since he died. You've been paying some suppliers twice, others not at all. Austin's shoulders sagged. I thought something was wrong, but numbers never made sense to me, and I was afraid to ask for help. Afraid people would say I wasn't fit to run the place. You're losing about $300 a year to duplicated payments and missed price negotiations. Your breeding schedule conflicts with your feed purchases. You're buying expensive winter feed for cattle you sold the month before. Can it be fixed? Roberta pulled another ledger toward her, then another. She worked through them methodically, making quick notes on a scrap of paper. Austin watched her hands move with confidence across the pages. This was a language she understood, clearly as he understood cattle and land. Finally, she sat back. Your accounts are catastrophic, Mr. Hayes, not because you're careless, but because you're trying to manage systems you were never taught. Your father probably learned from his father, built the knowledge over decades, so it can't be saved. I didn't say that. She met his eyes. It can be saved, but it'll take months of work. I'll need to reorganize everything, renegotiate contracts, find every missing payment and duplicated bill, and even then, we'll be cutting close. You have a banknote due in February. Yes, $500. You currently have $215 in accessible funds. With winter feed and veterinary costs still coming, we're short. And the gap's tight. Austin braced his hands on the table. For a moment, he looked like a man staring into an abyss. Then he straightened. Can you do it? Get us to February with enough to cover that note. Roberta looked at the ledgers again, at the careful way he'd tried to maintain his father's systems despite not understanding them, at the good land visible through the window, the quality cattle, the solid buildings. This ranch had been 3 generations of Hayes family work. It deserved a chance. Yes, she said. If you trust me to reorganize how you do things, if you're willing to make hard choices when I tell you they're necessary, I trust you. Then we start now. She opened a fresh page in the cleanest ledger. First, we're creating a new system. Everything gets recorded immediately, no loose papers. Every payment gets checked against invoices before it goes out. And you need to start asking better prices for your cattle. You're selling prime beef at average rates. Austin nodded slowly. Relief showed in his face, mixed with something else. Hope. Maybe. Or just the easing of long-carried burden. What are your wages? He asked. $5 weekly until February, if we make the note payment. $10 weekly after. Fair. More than fair. Roberta drew the lamp closer as afternoon light began fading. Outside, autumn wind rattled the windows. Winter was coming, bringing cold and hardship and the weight of that February deadline. But for the first time in 2 years, Roberta felt purpose beyond mere survival. She opened the first ledger again and began to work. November arrived with cold gray skies and threats of early snow. Roberta established a routine that became as natural as breathing. Mornings with Tommy, teaching him letters and helping Mrs. Chen with her mending to pay for childcare. Afternoons at the Hayes Ranch, turning chaos into order. The kitchen table became her command center. She'd spread the current ledgers across its surface, organized receipts into neat stacks, and worked through each transaction with methodical precision. Austin learned to save every scrap of paper for her review. "You paid Hendricks $22 for winter feed," she said one afternoon, holding up an invoice. "His standard rate is 18. Austin frowned. He said prices went up. "For everyone else." "Maybe. But you buy in bulk and pay on time. That's worth a discount, not a premium?" She made a note. "I'll speak with him tomorrow." "You don't need to." "Yes, I do. You're too nice." "Austin, these men respect you, but they also know you won't argue prices." That ends now. She rode into town the next day and returned with a new contract, $18 per load, locked in through spring. Austin stared at the paper like she'd worked magic. "How did you manage that?" "I showed him your payment history. Proved you're reliable. Then I mentioned that Jacobson's feed might appreciate steady business." She smiled slightly. Hendricks decided he valued your custom after all. Slowly, methodically. She worked through 2 years of tangled accounts. She found payments owed to Austin that he'd never collected, nearly $200 sitting unclaimed, because he'd lost track of who owed what. She reorganized his herd records and discovered he was underfeeding some cattle while overfeeding others, wasting expensive grain. Progress appeared in small victories. The ledgers grew neater. The monthly expenditure column shrank. The income column. After she renegotiated his cattle prices with the Fort Benson quartermaster, increased by 15%. But the February deadline loomed large. Even with improvements, they were still short by nearly $150. Austin started joining her at the table during her work sessions. He'd bring coffee, ask questions about her methods, slowly learning the systems she built. She appreciated that he didn't hover or doubt her decisions. He asked, listened, and implemented her suggestions without wounded pride. "My father would have liked you," he said one afternoon. "He always said numbers told stories if you knew how to read them. Your father built something worth saving. I'm just helping you see what's already there. It's more than that." Austin's voice was quiet. "You're teaching me how to run this place properly. Not just survive it." Their working relationship grew comfortable. She learned to read his silences when he was worried, when he was simply thinking. He learned her signals when she frowned at numbers. Real problems existed when she pursed her lips. She was solving puzzles in her head. The community noticed. The banker, Samuel Green, visited one afternoon and found Roberta explaining projected spring income to Austin. "Mrs. Brennan," Green said, surprise evident, "I didn't know you were working the Hayes accounts. Someone needs to—" She showed him her reorganized ledgers without hesitation. "We'll have your February payment ready, Mr. Green, with interest." After Green left, looking impressed despite himself, Austin leaned back in his chair. "You just promised him money we don't quite have yet." "We'll have it." Roberta returned to her calculations. "We have to." As November deepened, Roberta realized she looked forward to her afternoon rides to the ranch. Not just for the work, though she'd forgotten how much she enjoyed the clarity of numbers, but for the quiet company, for coffee shared in comfortable silence, for the way Austin asked her opinion on ranch decisions, genuinely valuing her input. One evening, as she prepared to leave, Austin walked her to her horse. The first snow had started falling, light flakes disappearing against dark ground. "Roberta," he said, "I want you to know I'm grateful, not just for the accounts, for making this place feel less empty." She looked at him. Really looked. Saw a good man carrying impossible weight alone. Same as her. "You're welcome, Austin, and thank you for giving me purpose again." She rode home through falling snow, her wedding ring solid on her finger, her mind already planning tomorrow's work. The accounts still weren't balanced. February still threatened. But for the first time since James died, she felt like more than a woman barely surviving. She felt necessary, capable, almost whole. December settled over the land like a heavy blanket. Snow fell in earnest now, transforming the ranch into something from a winter painting. Roberta worked longer hours as the February deadline grew closer, sometimes staying past sunset to finish calculations by lamplight. One evening, a blizzard caught them unprepared. Roberta had been so focused on a particularly tangled set of receipts that she hadn't noticed the darkening sky. When she finally looked up, the windows showed nothing but white. "You can't ride in this," Austin said from the stove, where he'd started preparing a simple dinner. "You'll get lost before you make town." "Tommy, Mrs. Chen knows you're here. She'll keep him safe." He set a plate before her. "Eat. Storm will blow through by morning." They ate in comfortable silence, the howl of wind outside making the kitchen feel smaller, more intimate. After, they returned to the accounts, working side by side at the lamplit table. "Tell me about your husband," Austin said suddenly. The question surprised her, but not unpleasantly. James was a good man, steady, hard-working, kind to his core. He drove freight between here and Denver, always came home with small gifts for me and Tommy. "How did he die?" "Wagon accident on a mountain pass. Wheel broke. Whole rig went over. They said he died instantly." She touched her wedding ring without thinking. "I found out afterward that he'd borrowed money to expand the business. Loans I didn't know about. When he died, creditors appeared like vultures. I sold everything to pay them. But it wasn't quite enough. Had to sell the business itself." "That's why you ended up at the assayer's office." "That's why." She looked at him. "What about your father?" Austin's hands stilled on the papers. "He was teaching me to break a new horse. Young stallion. Too much spirit. Threw him hard. He hit his head on a fence post. Gone before the doctor arrived." "I'm sorry." "He was 61. Worked this land since he was younger than I am now. Built it from a homestead into a real ranch." Austin's voice roughened. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing him. Like I should know all this naturally, the way he did. He had decades to learn. You've had 18 months. It's Hayes land. Has been for 3 generations. If I lose it..." "You won't." She said it firmly. "We won't let that happen." They worked in silence for a while. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, warmth from the stove and lamp pushed back the darkness. "Can I confess something?" Austin asked. "Of course. I've been lonely. Not just since my father died, before that too. This ranch takes everything I have. No time for socializing, for church socials or dances, just work, day after day." He met her eyes. "Then you arrived. And suddenly the kitchen doesn't feel so empty. The work doesn't feel so heavy." Roberta's throat tightened. "I know that loneliness. After James died, I felt like I was drowning in silence. Tommy was too young to understand. I had no one to talk to about the weight of it all. And now I come here and the numbers make sense. The work matters. And you?" She paused, choosing words carefully. "You listen when I talk. Value what I say. That's rare." Snow hammered the windows. The lamp flickered in a draft, then steadied. "I'm glad you're here," Austin said quietly. "So am I." 3 days later, Tommy visited the ranch for the first time. The storm had passed, leaving the world crystalline and beautiful. Roberta brought him along, knowing Mrs. Chen needed the day for her own family. Austin showed Tommy the barn, the cattle, the chickens. He lifted the boy onto a gentle mare and led her around the corral while Tommy laughed with delight. He showed him how to scatter feed for the chickens, explained about cows and calves, answered endless questions with patient good humor. Roberta watched from the porch, something shifting in her chest. She saw Austin through new eyes, not just her employer, not just a man struggling with ledgers. She saw gentleness, patience, the kind of steady strength that made good fathers. Tommy ran to her, breathless. "Mama, can we come back? Mr. Hayes said I could help name the spring calves." "We'll see, sweetheart." But she was already seeing a future she hadn't let herself imagine. Seeing this ranch not as a workplace, but as something more. Seeing Austin not as an employer, but as she stopped the thought, too soon, too dangerous. She had Tommy to think about, her own heart still healing, and yet, as they prepared to leave, Austin caught her eye. Something passed between them. Understanding. Maybe. Recognition that boundaries were shifting, that their careful professional distance was becoming something neither had planned for. That night, after Tommy fell asleep, Roberta sat by her window and looked at her wedding ring. She thought about James, about the life they'd built, about grief and healing, and whether hearts could hold more than one love. She didn't have answers, but for the first time, she was willing to ask the questions. January arrived like a hammer blow. The cold snap hit on the 5th, temperatures dropping so fast that water froze in buckets within minutes. Austin woke to find 3 cattle dead in the north pasture, frozen where they'd huddled against the wind. He worked all morning digging frozen ground for burial. Doc Peterson came to check the rest of the herd, pronouncing them stressed but alive. His bill was $45 money they'd carefully budgeted for spring emergencies. Now gone in a morning. Roberta arrived that afternoon to find Austin gray-faced with exhaustion. The kitchen table was covered with new veterinary receipts and his rough attempts to record them properly. "I tried to keep the system you built," he said, "but I think I made it worse." She reviewed his work silently. He'd recorded the payments correctly but put them in wrong columns, throwing off their careful balance. "It's fixable. We just need to 3 cattle. Roberta, 3 of my best breeding stock. That's money we can't recover." "I know. But we adjust. We always adjust." But that night, Tommy's fever returned. Different from before, not the same illness, Dr. Morrison said, but another infection. Common in winter. Nothing to panic about. But Tommy needed rest and watching. Roberta stayed home the next day. And the next. And the next. A week passed with her unable to return to the ranch. She tried working on notes at home, but without the actual ledgers. Without seeing the full picture. She couldn't make real progress. Tommy improved slowly. By the 8th day, his fever had broken, but he remained weak and tired. Mrs. Chen couldn't watch an ill child. Her own grandchildren needed her. Roberta was trapped. She sent a note to Austin explaining. He replied immediately, "Family first. Don't worry about the ranch." But she did worry. She lay awake, calculating numbers in her head. Knowing each day she missed made February's deadline tighter. Knowing Austin would try to maintain the accounts alone and likely create problems she'd need to fix. When she finally returned to the ranch on day 9, she found her fears confirmed. Austin had kept working, kept trying, but the ledgers showed a week of tangled entries, duplicated payments, missed recordings, math errors that cascaded through multiple pages. He stood by the window, looking defeated. "I'm sorry. I thought I understood your system, but without you here to check my work, it's not your fault." "It is, though. This is my ranch. I should be able to manage basic accounts without help. Nobody expects you to know everything. Austin. My father did." Roberta felt her own exhaustion rising. Tommy had been sick. She'd barely slept, terrified of losing him the way she'd lost James. And now she was looking at a week of wasted work, of problems created instead of solved, of the February deadline looming closer while they slid backward. "Your father isn't here," she said, more sharply than intended. "You are. And you're doing your best with skills you were never taught. That's enough. Is it because from where I'm standing, we're still going to lose everything?" "Not if we work harder. You have a sick child. You can't work harder, you're already stretched to breaking." Silence fell between them, heavy, strained. Not anger exactly, but the weight of impossible circumstances pressing down. A letter arrived the next day from Banker Green. A polite but firm reminder that the February note was due in 5 weeks. He'd heard about Austin's livestock losses. While sympathetic, the bank still expected full payment. That evening, Roberta sat in her small cabin while Tommy slept. She'd done the calculations a dozen times, even with everything she'd fixed, everything she'd saved. They were still short by $130. The dead cattle had cost them the buffer she'd so carefully built. She could keep working, keep trying. But was she just delaying the inevitable? And what about Tommy? He needed her attention, her care. Was she neglecting her own child to save someone else's ranch at the Hayes Ranch? Austin sat in his father's chair by the cold fireplace. The accounts lay on the table behind him, mocking his efforts. He'd tried so hard. Worked every hour of daylight. Asked for help when pride screamed against it. And still, failure loomed. Maybe it was time to admit defeat. Sell the ranch while it still had value. Take whatever money remained and start over somewhere else. Doing something he actually understood. The thought made him physically sick. But what choice remained outside both their windows? January wind howled across frozen land. The coldest month. The hardest month. The month that tested whether anything could survive until spring. Late January darkness came early to the Hayes Ranch. Austin sat in his father's chair, a half-written letter to the bank on his lap. He'd started it 3 times, each version an admission that he couldn't make the February payment, that he'd failed. He couldn't finish it, at her cabin. Roberta stood at the window watching Tommy sleep. The boy's health had returned, but the week away from the ranch haunted her. She'd been foolish to think she could save Austin's ranch while raising a child alone. Foolish to imagine she could do anything beyond survive. But even as she thought it, rebellion stirred. She'd spent 2 years merely surviving. The ranch accounts had given her purpose again, made her feel capable and needed. Austin had given her back her ring, her dignity, her sense of worth. Was she really going to give up now? She wrapped her coat tight and walked outside. The night was brutally cold, stars sharp as broken glass overhead. Her breath fogged the air. Somewhere in the darkness, the Hayes Ranch stood 5 miles west. Austin was probably sitting alone in that empty house, carrying his burden in silence, just like she was carrying hers. The thought crystallized something in her mind. They were both drowning separately when they might survive together, but only if they stopped pretending they could manage alone. She returned inside and wrote a quick note to Mrs. Chen, asking her to watch Tommy for a few hours in the morning. Then she sat at her small table and worked through the accounts from memory, checking her calculations one more time. There had to be a solution. Had to be. At dawn, she rode toward the Hayes Ranch through bitter cold. She found Austin in the barn, forking hay to the cattle. His movements were mechanical. Exhausted. Roberta, is Tommy all right? He's fine. I needed to see you. They went inside. The kitchen was cold. He hadn't bothered lighting the stove for just himself. She lit it while he watched silently, then pulled the ledgers toward her. I've been thinking, she said, about the February note, about everything. We're still short. You know it. I know it. Yes. But I have an idea. She spread the papers out. The north section, the 15 acres by the creek. It's good land but marginal for cattle. Too rocky. Too much brush. My grandfather homesteaded that section. I know, but it's also worth money. Real money. If we find the right buyer. She showed him her calculations. I made inquiries last week. The railroad's surveying routes through here. That land has timber they need and water access. They'd pay $200 for it. Austin stared at the numbers. Sell off part of the ranch. Yeah, sell off the part that's costing you more than it earns. The rest of the ranch is profitable. I've proven that. You don't need that section to survive. It's Hayes land. Hayes land will be bank land in 4 weeks if we don't make that payment. Her voice softened. I know it's hard, but sometimes keeping what matters means letting go of what doesn't. He walked to the window. Looking out at land his family had held for 3 generations. She gave him time, understanding the weight of his choice. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Something I need to say." He turned. "I've been afraid." Roberta continued. "Afraid to let this work matter too much. Afraid to let you matter. Because losing James nearly destroyed me. And I didn't think I could survive losing something I cared about again." "Roberta, let me finish. This past week, away from the ranch, I realized something. I was so busy protecting myself from loss that I forgot how to live. You gave me back my ring. Austin. But more than that, you gave me back purpose. You trusted me when I had nothing to offer but numbers on paper. You made me feel necessary again." She stood and moved closer. "I can't do this alone anymore. Can't save the ranch. Can't raise Tommy. Can't just survive day to day. And you can't either. But together we might actually make it." Austin's throat worked. I'm saying we stop pretending we're just employer and employee. We stop pretending we're not both drowning. We reach for each other instead of struggling alone." She took a shaky breath. "If you want to, if I'm not reading this wrong, you're not reading it wrong." His voice was rough. "I just didn't think you'd want after your husband. James was my first love. You'd be my second. There's room in my heart for both. What about Tommy? Tommy already loves you. You should see his face when he talks about the ranch, about the calves, about Mr. Hayes who taught him to feed the chickens." Her eyes stung. "He deserves a father who'll be there. You deserve a family who'll make this house feel like home." Austin closed the distance between them. He took her hands carefully, like she was something precious and breakable. "I haven't let myself hope for this. Didn't think I deserved it. We both deserve it. We've both paid our dues in loneliness." They stood together in the cold kitchen as dawn light strengthened outside. Not kissing, that would come later. Just holding hands, choosing each other, choosing to stop drowning alone. "The north section," Austin said finally. "If selling it saves the ranch, we sell it. And after February, we build together." They worked through the day and into the night. Roberta sent for her papers from the cabin. They drafted a proposal for the railroad, calculated exact figures for the bank, reorganized remaining accounts to show the ranch's true profitability without the marginal land. As dawn broke again, exhausted but triumphant, they had their answer. The numbers finally balanced. Barely, tightly, with no room for error. But they balanced. Austin looked at her across the lamplit table. "You saved more than my ranch. You gave me back more than a ring." She touched his hand. "You gave me purpose, home, a future I'd stopped believing in. So we do this, we actually do this. We do this, outside. The harshest part of winter was breaking. Inside. 2 people who'd been carrying impossible weight alone had finally learned that together. They might carry anything. Early February brought a break in the weather. The snow melted enough to make town roads passable again. Austin and Roberta rode together through morning sunshine. Their proposal for the railroad folded carefully in his pocket. The meeting with banker Green happened first. Samuel Green was a cautious man, skeptical of last-minute saves. But he listened as Roberta presented their reorganized accounts, explaining every change she'd made, every cost she'd cut, every price she'd negotiated higher. "The ranch is profitable," she said, spreading the ledgers before him. "It was always profitable. It just needed proper management." "And the February payment?" Green asked. Austin produced the railroad's letter. They'd accepted his offer for the north section, $200. Payable immediately upon transfer of deed. Combined with current funds, it left them $50 over the required payment. Green studied the papers in silence. Finally, he nodded. "I'll approve the restructured note. But Mr. Hayes, This is your last margin for error. Next year. I expect full payment on schedule. You'll have it, Roberta said firmly. Walking from the bank into February sunshine, Austin stopped on the boardwalk. People moved around them, townspeople on morning errands, freight wagons rumbling past. Normal life. Continuing on. But for Austin, nothing felt normal. Everything felt new. Roberta, he said, I need to do something. He pulled a small box from his coat pocket. Inside lay a simple gold band, not ornate, not expensive, but solid and true. This isn't fancy, he said. I can't compete with your first marriage, can't offer wealth or ease, but I can offer partnership, respect, a home for you and Tommy, and love the kind that builds slowly and lasts. Roberta looked at the ring, then at her own hands. Her wedding band from James still circled her right hand, worn thin with years. This new ring would go somewhere else. I'm not asking you to forget him. Austin continued. I'm asking you to choose something new. Choose us. Choose the life we could build together. She took the ring from the box. It caught the sunlight, glinting gold. 2 rings, she said softly. 2 loves, both honored. She slipped the new band onto her left hand. The fit was perfect. Yes, she said, I choose us. This time they did kiss, right there on the boardwalk. Chaste, brief, but full of promise. People noticed and smiled. By nightfall, the whole town would know that Austin Hayes had proposed to Roberta Brennan, and she'd accepted. They rode back to the ranch together. Talking about practical things? When to marry soon, probably. Nothing fancy. Whether to expand the house for Tommy. How to manage spring calving with their reduced herd. Normal life. Continuing on. But nothing about it felt ordinary. At the ranch, Tommy was waiting. Mrs. Chen had brought him early, and he ran to meet them with 8-year-old exuberance. Did you save the ranch? Did the bank say yes? We saved the ranch, Austin confirmed. Swinging the boy up. And your mama and I have news. Tommy looked between them, eyes widening. Are you getting married? How did you? Mama's been happy, real happy. And you look at her the way Papa used to? Tommy's voice went soft. Is that okay that you look at Mama like Papa did? Austin set him down carefully. Your Papa was a good man who loved your Mama very much. I'll never try to replace him. But if you'll let me, I'd like to be here for you both. Teach you about ranching. Help you grow up. Be someone you can count on. Tommy considered this seriously. Then he hugged Austin hard. Can I still call you Mr. Hayes? You can call me whatever feels right. Can I help with the spring calves? Every single one. Inside. The kitchen felt different already. Warmer, fuller, alive with possibility. Roberta put coffee on while Austin showed Tommy the ledgers, explaining how his mama's work had saved everything. Numbers are important, Austin said. Your mama's the smartest person I know with them. Tommy beamed with pride. That evening, after Mrs. Chen had taken Tommy home and Austin had finished barn chores, they sat together at the kitchen table, not working this time, just sitting, hands linked, watching lamplight catch their rings. When do you want to marry? Austin asked. Soon. No point in waiting. Next week. Perfect. Will you move in here? You and Tommy both. Yes. She looked around the kitchen, seeing it differently now. Their kitchen, their home. I'll need to make some changes, though. Curtains. Maybe paint. This house needs a woman's touch. This house needs you. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness gathered outside. A year ago, they'd both been drowning him in impossible ledgers, her in desperate poverty. Now they sat together, hands linked, futures secured. Not through luck or miracles, but through work and trust and the courage to reach for each other when reaching felt impossible. Two people drowning separately, Roberta said softly, but surviving together. Outside, winter was breaking. Inside, new life was beginning. Late February brought the first real promise of spring. Ice melted from the creek. The earliest birds returned, their calls cheerful in morning light. The land itself seemed to exhale after winter's long hold. Roberta moved into the Hayes Ranch the day after their quiet wedding at the church. Mrs. Chen and Banker Green had stood witness. Tommy had worn his best clothes and smiled the whole time. Afterward, they'd simply come home and started their new life. The house transformed. Roberta sewed curtains from fabric Austin bought in town, nothing fancy, but cheerful yellow that brightened the kitchen. She arranged her books beside his on the parlor shelf. Tommy's things filled the upstairs bedroom Austin cleared and painted. The house felt occupied now, lived in, loved. In the barn, Austin taught Tommy how to help with evening chores. The boy was too small for heavy work, but he could scatter feed for chickens, gather eggs, carry water buckets. He followed Austin everywhere, asking constant questions, soaking up knowledge like parched ground-soaked rain. "Will the calves really come in spring?" Tommy asked. "Should start arriving in March. You'll help me check on them every morning." Every morning, every single one. That's what ranchers do. Tommy's chest puffed with pride. In the kitchen, Roberta maintained the accounts with the same precision she'd brought in autumn. But now they were her accounts too. Her ranch too. The ledgers showed steady profit, nothing dramatic, but solid and sustainable. The crisis had passed. The future looked secure. One evening in late February, after Tommy had gone to bed, Austin and Roberta sat at the kitchen table one last time before sleep. The day's work was done. Accounts balanced, chores completed. A normal evening in their new normal life. Roberta worked on the next month's budget while Austin mended a bridle. Lamplight pooled warm around them. Outside, the last of winter's cold pressed against the windows, but inside, the stove kept everything warm. She paused in her calculations and looked at her hands. 2 rings now. The thin gold band from James on her right hand, worn and precious. The new band from Austin on her left, bright and promising. 2 loves, 2 lives, both honored. "What are you thinking?" Austin asked. "That I'm happy, really, truly happy." She smiled. "A year ago I was selling my wedding ring to buy medicine. Now I have 2 rings, a home, a partner, and a future. It seems impossible. You saved us both. We saved each other." She reached across to take his hand. That's what partnership means. Upstairs, Tommy's voice called out, "Mama, can I have water?" "I'll get it," Austin said. Rising, he paused at the doorway. "Get used to that. I'll always get it." Roberta watched him climb the stairs to tend to her son, their son now. She heard their voices murmuring. Tommy's question about the calves. Austin's patient answer. The sounds of family, of home. She returned to her ledgers, but her mind wandered. She thought about the assayer's office, about desperate mornings and impossible choices, about Austin's kindness that terrible day, his quiet offer that had saved more than he knew. She thought about James too, without pain now, just memory, warm and grateful. He'd given her 15 good years, a son she adored, and the skills to survive after he was gone. She would always love him, but hearts, she'd learned, were more spacious than grief suggested. There was room for past love and future love both. Austin returned and settled back into his chair. "He wants to name the first calf." "That's fine." "He wants to name it James." Roberta's eyes stung. "Really? Said it was after his papa. So the ranch would have a piece of him too." Austin's voice was gentle. "I told him that was a fine name. Hope that's all right." "More than all right." They worked in comfortable silence. Small domesticities filled the evening, her accounting, his mending, the crackling stove, the ticking clock. Nothing dramatic, nothing extraordinary, Just life, continuing on. Through the window, stars emerged in the clearing sky. Winter's worst had passed. Spring waited just beyond the horizon, bringing new calves, new growth, new beginnings. Roberta closed her ledger and set down her pen. The numbers told their story clearly. Income exceeded expenses. Debts were manageable. The ranch would survive not just this year, but many years to come. They'd built something stable, something lasting. But the true wealth couldn't be captured in ledgers. It lived in Tommy's laughter echoing through the barn, in Austin's steady presence beside her, in the transformation of this house from empty structure to warm home, in the quiet joy of building something together that neither could have built alone. "Come to bed," Austin said softly. She took his offered hand and rose. They checked on Tommy one last time. The boy sprawled asleep, dreaming probably of spring calves and ranch adventures. They banked the fire, trimmed the lamps, locked the doors, all the small rituals of ending a day, in their bedroom. Roberta looked out the window one last time. The land stretched dark and peaceful under starlight. Hayes land, held for 3 generations and now passing to a 4th. But more than that, their land, their home, their future. Austin came to stand beside her. No regrets. Not a single one. "Even though this isn't the life you imagined, it's better than what I imagined. Because I stopped imagining and started living." Outside, the first promises of spring touched the frozen ground. Inside, 2 people who'd nearly lost everything counted their true wealth. Not in money or cattle or land, though those mattered, but in partnership and purpose, and the quiet certainty that together they could weather any storm. The ledger's balanced now, in more ways than numbers could show.